Welcome back to returning listeners and welcome to new listeners. This is 1 year on. I'm Alison, and following on from episode 12, today's episode is about my interactions with the Stroke Foundation. One day I was resting at home and received a phone call from the Stroke Foundation. I can't even remember how they got my number. I think I must have signed something at the hospital to say that they could contact me. And indeed, I came home from the hospital with a massive folder full of information sheets and booklets which I'd gotten overwhelmed with, so I'd laid them aside. But talking to someone was different. The lady was nice. She asked how I was going and gave me some things to think about. She mentioned returning to work. At the time that she mentioned that, my brain was a mess and I had no inkling of when or even if I would be able to return to work. I was working hard to just do the normal day-to-day activities and not put milk in the cupboard. When she called first in early April, she said I was doing really well, and she said she would call back in a few weeks. She wanted to send me some information on email, and she did, and it was a massive email. She provided me information on young stroke, including links, how to handle fatigue as this was an issue that I was having, mood in terms of how to manage your emotions as they can be very strong, and certainly I'd had very strong emotions at that point. She suggested I get a counsellor. She mentioned depression and anxiety, which is very common after stroke, and we certainly talked about how I wasn't handling life very well at that point. She asked how my kids were doing, and that was something I hadn't really thought about at that point in April. She suggested contacting the school and asking them for supports, which I did. They saw me as essentially normal, but just a few weird bits and pieces and less communicative than normal. But I was still physically the same, and I made it very clear to them I was still the same person and this would improve. Thankfully, their two schools were very helpful. She mentioned thinking, memory and perceptions and how that can be difficult, and provided so much information in her email. We spoke about neuropsychology, neuroplasticity, communication, aphasia. There wasn't much we didn't talk about. She called back 2 weeks later, and the conversation then was around returning to driving, how to handle getting my licence back, and what I might need from my employer when I did return to work. She explored if I would be prepared to share my story with the Stroke Foundation that could be put out there on their socials, and of course I was happy to do that. She said she would pass my name on to her colleagues. A couple of months later, another person from the Stroke Foundation contacted me on email from the digital community team. She was also lovely and shared some more links of things that I might like to consider and read about. Other people who had shared their experience. The digital community person said she would call back and do an interview and then write it up. A few weeks later, I received an email from their media and public relations person who wanted to know if I would be happy to participate in sharing my story through National Stroke Week in August. I said of course I would be happy to. I saw this as a way of giving back to the Stroke Foundation for their help and support, which was all free of charge. The digital person got back in touch and we spoke on the phone, and she wrote a lovely piece from that interview which became my story and that they shared. That was in June, and we edited and shared it in July. They put my story and a nice photo I took when I was out on one of my walks on their Facebook page, their website, and actually really everywhere. I got quite a lot of engagement and was happy to answer these questions the people had. There was quite a supportive community out there. Coming up to the end of July, and their media team reached out again and asked me to do a live-to-air interview with the ABC Canberra Radio. I was familiar with the radio station and indeed their studios, as I had been in there several times before in the past with my choir and for my work as a breast examination guinea pig, which I do for the local university. They were very welcoming at the radio station, and whilst I was waiting, I sat with the producer while she built my interview and guiding her on what things I thought would be worth getting out there. That interview was short. It's only a couple of minutes, a lot shorter than I really wanted because there's so much to say. But it was a start, for me, and certainly in feeling like I could communicate again under pressure. What's more pressure than live radio? Well, maybe live television, I suppose. What followed were requests to do a television interview for the ABC News, which would also be turned into a digital story. And I also did some radio grabs for the local commercial channel. I believe they were used during various shows. Finally, I was asked to do a more long format live-to-air radio interview with another local station on the weekend. There were 2 interviewers, and they spent the whole interview wondering at me and what I was doing. Each and every interview, they honed in on the fact that I was doing my own therapy, typing Pride and Prejudice. Mr. Darcy. I suppose the world loves Mr. Darcy. And so after July, at the beginning of August, I was all stroke foundationed out. Well, I wasn't really, because I loved the media gigs. And while they absolutely wore me out, each one of them, I was very happy to do them. It showed me that the skills were still there, and that pacing and fatigue were the issue, not the communication skills. I wanted to show the Stroke Foundation my appreciation, and I organised a fundraiser through Facebook for my birthday. I'd never done one of these before. It raised quite a lot of money actually, and I was very surprised how much my friends and family were happy to contribute. Since I'd come into sharing my stroke experience, it had come to my attention that another lady at my choir had had a stroke over a decade ago. She was quite badly affected physically and still walked with a limp and had limited use of one of her arms and hands. She took me under her wing. It was utterly adorable, and she shared her story with me. She'd been a jazz singer, and singing was an absolute passion. She wanted me to let the Stroke Foundation know she was going to do a fundraising event for them, so I passed on her details. My next contact with the Stroke Foundation has been when I was invited to present to the Stroke Foundation's board in February this year. They always had someone at the start of each meeting sharing their lived experience. I was so excited to be doing this and spent a lot of time writing what I wanted to say. I didn't want to read a speech exactly, but I knew that I had to be properly prepared. On the day I had some technical issues, and the meeting link, which was Zoom, needed an executable file to be loaded up. My work laptop didn't allow us to load up any new software, and I was a bit stressed out. I ended up using my work computer, my own home desktop computer, and my daughter's iPad at the last minute whilst people were messaging me. I'd started to investigate how to log into this meeting days before, and on the day I started getting it all ready half an hour before. So it wasn't as if I left it till the last minute. When I got into the meeting, the camera was pointed at a large group of people far away, and they weren't in focus, so that didn't help me at all. I didn't know who was talking to me. Their sound in the room wasn't good either. Their microphone must have been at the other end of the room. I had headphones on, so I knew it wasn't at my end. I'd also banned my kids from using the internet, so I knew that wasn't the issue. Since COVID times, we've become very good at Zoom or Microsoft Teams calls. I had a really negative experience during this meeting, and it's such a shame. I provided feedback to them about all the technical issues, and the CEO called me herself and we discussed it, and the chair of the board messaged me too. I'd shared that I was thinking about starting a podcast, this one, and they had put me in touch with another stroke survivor who runs his own podcast, who's got a lot of subscribers and videos produced. And they were keen for me and Bill to connect. I've been back in touch with the digital coordinator who had suggested using Enable Now as a platform that I might consider sharing my story in the future, including my intention to write about my return to work. The Stroke Foundation has been really helpful for me. They do great work, and I've been very happy to help them in every way that I did. Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this episode, please like, share, subscribe and leave a comment. I'll be back next time to talk about stroke as a general topic and what I've found from my readings, and much of it was sobering. Thank you.